Okay. Well, up until the plane started skidding, it was pretty much a normal flight. The only difference being uh, the aircraft had suffered a air conditioning casualty earlier, so we were basically flying in about 90-degree heat the entire trip from Guantanamo to Jax, and so it was about 9:44 p.m. and we were coming in for our landing. Everything seemed normal. There was heavy rain outside and lightning. We could see that. Uh, we initially we felt like we touched down, and then there were two big bounces. The airplane literally bounced, and then and it really shook the aircraft when we bounced, and then we hit the barrier at the end of the runway. Um, From that point, for about 3 or 4 seconds, it was pretty chaotic. People were bouncing around, had been thrown around quite a bit. Some unfortunate people had forgot to secure their seatbelts, so they were flying over the seats in front of them. Um, and then within seconds, we were hit by a deluge of water, which kind of added another level of terror to the to the whole situation. I When we hit, the top of the aircraft was cracked, and so when the front end of the aircraft went into the water, that water displacement came up over the top of the aircraft and into the interior, and pretty much soaked everybody inside. So that was another level of panic that we encountered. Um, so for the first 30 to 45, excuse me, 30 to 45 seconds on the ground, it was pretty much chaos. People screaming, children crying, people calling out for help. There were calls for medics, for doctors, for nurses, because some people had hit their heads on the chairs in front of them. And probably the side partitions. And so we had some with some serious cuts. Uh, and then the flight crew sort of took over at that point, giving instructions on what to do. And the first thing they said was to um, get the side exits open, the emergency exits over the wings. Um, the That was a little slow to get communicated. People were really unsure what to do at that point. I think the thing that carried the day was the fact that this is a plane full of probably 90% were either active duty or retired military. Of every um, uh, of every shape and size, and we had sailors and Marines and soldiers and airmen on board, and Coast Guards. And I think at that point their training kind of kicked in. I mean, there were several that stepped up and started shouting orders to people. We got the hatches open. We started getting people out on the wings of the aircraft. And that was a major accomplishment. We got people into their life jackets. Unfortunately, some of them inflated those jackets a little prematurely, and so it was a little difficult to get them through the hatches. We had a couple people who came onto the aircraft initially in Guantanamo, a little bit impaired, either on crutches or with canes. So we had to assist getting them out of the aircraft. And I think once we got people out on the wings, we were able to get a life raft out, at least on the port side, which is the side I was on. Got the aircraft out, or I'm sorry, the life raft out and inflated, and it's quite sizable. They said it would hold like 100 people, but we probably had 60 or so in the life raft. Um, we got it, we got the women and children and the older people out and into that life raft. And this is all going on my side, so I really don't know what was happening on the other side of the aircraft. Um, but it was raining very hard. We had lightning in the area. None of them seemed too close to us, so that really wasn't a concern. There was fuel in the water from the aircraft. And probably by the time we got the hatches open, there was probably at least 6 or 8 emergency vehicles already there or coming into the scene. And that number grew exponentially probably in the next 15 to 20 minutes. And At the end, there were at least 40 or 50 emergency vehicles there. But we got people in the raft. Um, the problem with the raft was once we got it pushed away from the aircraft, it was kind of floating away on its own. And one of the firefighters actually stripped off his equipment and jumped in the water, swam out to the raft. It's probably, I don't know, 70, 80 feet, and actually brought a fire hose out with him, tied it onto the raft, and the other firemen that were still on the on the pier on the walkway actually pulled the raft over and was able to get those people out. Um, at that by that time, some of the uh, fire and rescue and police boats started showing up, and we were able to get the rest of the people off of the aircraft, onto the boats. The captain, the plane captain, was the last one to get on the boat, at least on my side of the aircraft. And at that time, we had all the people on, at least on shore, and were receiving medical care. Uh, I really lost track of time. I would say 30 minutes from the time we hit the water to the we started putting people on the shore, on the beach. I mean, it's hard to track time because you just, there's, you lose track of what's going on. You get caught up in the moment, and all you want to do is get people off that aircraft. There was a fear of fire because of the fuel on the water. Um, so it was a very harrowing time. I think, I guess looking back, I would say it was probably 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes before we got everybody off the aircraft. But again, I think a lot of that was due to the professionalism of the flight attendants, the aircraft crew, that were ensuring that everybody got off and as safely as possible. Um, I'm very happy to say everyone got off, at least for the most part, on their own power. We didn't have anyone under their own power. We didn't seem to have any serious injuries. There were a few cuts, some that needed immediate attention. And later on, there were several people who were in neck braces and had to be taken from the hangar to local hospitals. And but I think for the most part, it was another miracle. You know, I don't know how we survived. Um, when I when I stop and think about it, it scares me. Um, at the time, I wasn't as scared as I got later on when I realized what could have happened and how bad it could have gotten, what the results could have been. I think had we not hit the water before we hit the barrier, I think that hitting the water slowed the momentum of the aircraft, and uh, probably saved us from being a more catastrophic accident than it was. Well, initially it's kind of a one of disbelief and of shock. I went forward and hit the seat in front of me. I hit my head, but it was just it was kind of a glancing blow. Uh, I felt more of an impact in my back because the person who was behind me came forward also, so it was kind of like a domino effect. Uh, After the initial shocks, or the initial shock and the water coming through the top of the aircraft, uh, it was one of trying to assess what was going on around me, and it was panic. People were helping people though. I mean, the call went out for medics and docs and nurses, And uh, sorry, um, and in true, excuse me, just in true military fashion, true military form, and what you would expect, people stepped up and helped each other. So I would say just getting people thinking about the idea that they had to leave the aircraft and moving in the right direction, getting their life jackets on. Um, I think that took precedent over everything. Not knowing if the plane was going to sink, if it was going to catch fire. Uh, there was, a lot of talk about what could happen, but I think once people realized that we had an evacuation plan and we could get out on the wings, and there were rafts out there and people ready to help, I think there was kind of a calming um, um, effect on people, and I think that probably carried the day. There was a lot of people helping people, and I think that probably made for a much easier transition out of that aircraft and into the rafts and boats. Well, coming in, the rain started beating on the aircraft pretty hard, and there was lightning all around. I guess quite a bit of quite a thunderstorm in the area. I guess prior to us landing, it had even been worse. Um, so again, the fear was lightning coming closer to the aircraft. It seemed to be off in the distance, so it wasn't. I didn't have an immediate concern about it, but of course, you never know. The rain was falling pretty hard. Everybody was pretty wet um, for obvious reasons. I don't know that anyone actually went into the water, at least not on my side of the aircraft. Um, it was pretty good transition from the wing into the raft and the boats. But the weather was pretty nasty. No, no, not until we bounced twice and hit the. It was 5 seconds. In 5 seconds, we bounced twice. At least the way I recall it, we bounced a couple of times and then hit the barrier, and there wasn't much more time than that. So there wasn't like we thought, oh, there's something out with this aircraft, or it's not handling properly, or the descents to this, or it's too fast. None of those thoughts went through my head. Um, it was just a matter of boom, boom, and then we hit the uh, we hit the barrier, and it was all stopped. So from whatever speed we were at, and you know, I really have no idea how fast we were going, but it was still pretty fast. We hit the barrier, and then it was just a complete stop. Everybody slammed into whatever was in front of them. As I said, some people went over the seats in front of them because they weren't wearing their seatbelts. And I would say the first 60 seconds or so was chaotic and people flying around. Um, some people probably overreacted a bit. Of course, I don't know if you can overreact in a situation like that, but once things calmed down and people started listening to the orders that were being given from the flight attendants, I think a calmness kind of prevailed, and people just started doing what they were supposed to do to get out. There wasn't a big push. There was no mass panic. There was no pushing and shoving. People just got out of the aircraft like they were supposed to do. Well, it's primarily military active duty, their dependents, going to and from the island. There were several families that were leaving the island and transferring to another duty station, and excuse me, and there were several like myself who are retired military and now work for defense contractors that have um, contracts on the island to go down and support whatever military activity that their contract calls for. But I would say for the I I would say at least 75% of the people on board were probably active duty. I well, I had a coworker. My company, we send two people down each time we make a trip down to support a mission. So I was traveling with Benny Hernandez, and he was sitting across the aisle and one back from me. Um, a matter of fact, he he lunged forward and he wears glasses, and his glasses actually, excuse me, his glasses actually scraped up his forehead. I think it looked a lot worse than it was, but of course, we lost the glasses. We don't know where they were, so it was it was a long, long night for Benny. Long day too. Uh, well, everybody around me bounced. Everybody was thrown forward, uh, and I saw people with cuts. I saw people were holding, their one their arms or their backs, or they were being helped by someone. So yes, everyone around us suffered some type of whiplash. When the aircraft came to the final hit that barrier, people bounced pretty hard. It was violent. It was very, very violent. Uh, no, because this one was. There are things that we encounter, throughout a military career, um, where you encounter them, but you're more or less know that they're coming at you, or you have some type of control over it. This was not a situation where we thought we were in any danger. This is not a situation that anyone in the cabin had any control of. It just happened, and the fact that it happened so sudden and so unexpectedly, and so many people were affected by it. There was over 140 people in that cabin, and every one of us was bounced and thrown forward, and in different ways and manners depending on how they were sitting and how they were buckled in and how tight they were buckled in. So, no, this doesn't really compare to anything that I ever encountered on when I was on active duty. Uh, well, we were in the hangar. We were all taken to a hangar and kind of looked at checked out by the medical personnel and given water. And uh, most of us knew what most of our belongings, we'd never see them again because the baggage compartment was underwater. So um, me and my coworker finally made it to the hotel about 1:30 in the morning. And we were fortunate enough to find rooms there on base just by good luck and calling. And there had been a couple of cancellations. Other people weren't so lucky, and they were farmed out all over the base. But 1:30 in the morning, and then we made the decision. We said, "Hey, are we are we going to drive home, train home? What are we going to do?" And Benny and I decided, well, if we don't get back on a plane now, we might not ever want to get back on a plane again. So we made that decision. So we called up the airline and booked the first thing heading to Norfolk uh, Saturday morning. So I was back home in Virginia Beach by about 1 o'clock Saturday afternoon. No, well, I mean, I've flown a lot in my career and a lot since I retired, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles, and uh, obviously this is the first time it's ever happened to me, and hopefully the last. But no, it hasn't scared me off. But I really thought it was necessary, at least for me. And I think Benny felt the same way that it was, rather than just face our fears. I mean, when I was leaving that aircraft, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to walk back to Virginia. I'm just going to hitchhike or walk or whatever it takes. I'm just not going to get in a plane again. But realized that was kind of silly, and we just decided we'd face our fears head on and get back on the plane. And we had two good flights on Southwest, and two good takeoffs, two good landings. So I'll fly again the next time I have to. It's necessary. Get back on the horse. No, I just think that there was a lot of very fortunate and happy people. I think uh, things could have turned out a lot worse than they did. Uh, I think God had His hand on that plane, and that's why I'm sitting here today.